this morning just to see if you were paying attention. All right. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting you as always from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. A busy, busy day. Here we're going to get you up to speed on all the headlines. Let's start with Russiagate. The investigation is evolving quickly, and we here at Just the News have more info for you on this time involving former acting CIA Director Mike Morell. Well, remember, a year or two ago, we broke the story right here on this show that Mike Morell was the guy that organized the Hunter Biden laptop. Yep, saying that it was Russian disinformation when it wasn't. You know all about that. Well, guess what? Our good reporter, Jerry Dunleavy, and I dug up some new stuff. Guess what? It turns out that Mike Morell was also the guy out there in 2016. He had just stepped down as acting CIA director and deputy director of the CIA. And he's out there pushing the Russian collusion hoax for Hillary Clinton. In fact, he used the most forward-leaning language of anybody during the 2016 election. He actually said that Donald Trump was likely a Kremlin agent. That's a little bit farther than most other people, and even further than what Christopher Steele said in his now debunked dossier. But there he is in the middle of it, and this helps us all understand something really important. The same actors keep showing up in the same pattern. That's why Kash Patel, the FBI director, opened up the grand conspiracy case. In 2016, Hillary Clinton has a problem she wants to get rid of. Mike Morell jumps in and makes it about Russia. In 2020, Joe Biden's got a problem with Hunter Biden and his laptop, and Mike Morell jumps in again and makes that case. That is why these things are connected and why we're spending so much time on this show describing its significance. More and more it becomes clear that the intelligence and law enforcement apparatus of this United States were used to carry out a political dirty trick, something that had not happened in America's history. By the way, Nixon tried to do it once in Watergate, and the second it came out that the CIA was asked to maybe thwart this FBI, Republicans turned on Richard Nixon. When are Democrats going to turn on Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden? We'll see. We'll ask that question to our first guest. We got Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee Chairman here. Before we turn to that, one more piece of news. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer issued subpoenas today, and there's some big names on the list. This is for Jeffrey Epstein evidence. Hillary and Bill Clinton, they're on the list. So were 3 former attorney generals and 2 former FBI directors. This is one of the biggest lists of names we've seen at any time for subpoenaing folks. We'll have more of that at justthenews.com. An incredible time now to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. You've got a lot of other news you've been watching today, right? You've been at the White House all day, right?
Yes, and as I looked at yours and Jerry Dunleavy's reporting, it's almost like Mike Morell has a boilerplate Trump man bad letter that he wrote in 2016 and 2020. And by the way, the same type numbers. It was 51 with the Hunter Biden letter and 50-ish with this letter. It's like, I'm telling you, it's like this guy has a boilerplate. Who else has he sent letters about?
Swap the details, keep the Trump name in there and send it out.
All right, so I want to stay on the Russiagate grand jury story for just a moment because I couldn't help noticing that the media wasn't very happy about it, and they kept using the same talking points about it. It's almost like a talking points memo went around.
Shocked.
Check it out.
These are unsubstantiated and largely debunked allegations by the Trump administration that former President Barack Obama and his aides in the intelligence community ordered a probe into the 2016 Trump campaign's connections to Russia to ruin his chances of becoming president.
Was trying to bring up these unsubstantiated claims about the role he argues former President Obama had in the 2016 election. But it really does bear repeating. This is looking into something for which there is no evidence to back it up. And it's really, it seems, a politically motivated move.
One thing that the Trump administration is trying to do is throw a bone to their supporters, many of whom believe legitimately in their hearts that people involved in the Biden and Obama administrations committed crimes and should be in prison. They believe that. There's no evidence to support that.
So it's likely they're going to put it in Florida, which means they're looking for a certain outcome, not where the facts actually drive you. So again, this looks like weaponization.
What did I tell you last night? I said that's what they're going to say. They're going to say it's in Florida, and so it's rigged. But apparently all the evidence that we have been bringing to you has been completely unsubstantiated, and there's no proof that anyone in the Obama administration ever did anything wrong when dealing with the now completely debunked Russian collusion narrative. It's absolutely amazing. And John, I just keep thinking to myself, well, that's fine if you want to say that it's not true and tell your viewers that and your supporters that, but at the end of the day, there's a grand jury likely down in Florida who's going to make that decision.
And those were the same media that told us Russia collusion was true. I just want to point that out. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, folks. Well, that's why Real America's Voice, Just the News, Truth Social are all thriving today. People can get truth around the legacy media who now mislead us, and we're very lucky to be joined at the top of the show by a person who was instrumental in unraveling Russia collusion. Was instrumental in protecting free speech by helping President Trump create the Truth Social platform. And today, he's instrumental in helping the intelligence community reform itself from those incredible failures that we've been chronicling here. He's the chairman of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, former House Intelligence Committee chairman, current CEO of the Trump Media and Technology Group, and good friend of this show, Devin Nunes. Congressman, good to have you back on, sir.
Great to be back with you guys.
All right.
Sorry I'm not there in person. But
I know. Last time you were here, we had a
It was
blast.
better last time,
That was
yeah.
great.
I hate to actually correct your reporting or
Yes.
maybe add to your reporting.
Please.
Or maybe this is a trivia question for you. So Mike Morrell, who you brought up,
Right.
Interesting character, John, but I think you know this, but he actually has a prior involvement in a scandal at a very high level. Do you know which scandal that is?
I know.
All right. So I got the letter and now Hillary Clinton's Russia collusion. Which one did I miss?
Benghazi.
Benghazi.
Of course.
Nailed it.
Oh, man, you two. Wow. I just lost the prize.
Benghazi. So
You're right.
Morrell
He
was
was
the
the
one
YouTube
who
video
ran
guy.
cover.
Yeah.
I believe he was the deputy director
That's right.
of the CIA at the time, or he may have been maybe in the White House as a national
right.
security advisor of some sort. But that was one of an early investigation. It's been now, I don't know, 13 years ago or whatever it's been. And he was the one who ran cover, went out on all the Sunday shows with a lot of the bogus talking points, along with Susan Rice.
The video.
Testified to our committee. So this guy has a long history of using his positions to help, surprisingly, Democrats.
How about that? Wow, that's a good one.
Yep.
All right, I want to ask you about that media sizzle that Amanda just played, because none of what happened in the last decade would have happened if the media weren't aider and abettors. Had they challenged Clinton or Biden or the 51 letter writers or any of the other things, Jack Smith, we might have had a different outcome in America, because media and culture drive a lot. When you hear that reporting and they say no evidence, I swear I've read some evidence in the last few weeks. Am I missing something?
Well, you have to remember, you have to start out with is there is no media. The legacy media in this country is solely owned by the Democratic Party and the left, and they're moving farther and farther to the left. I think in many cases, some economics has driven some of this, where a lot of these news channels are no longer profitable. It's very tough to make it in the news business. And so you had groups like Fusion GPS that got stood up, and you had these kind of alternative fake news developers and seeders. They go out, they develop fake stuff, they seed it, they water it, they grow it, and then they pay kind of the media that's left out there. They're like the minions, and they go out and harvest it, and they just regurgitate it over and over and over again. So what you're seeing is a combination of a lot of facts, but basically it's the collapse of the whole media complex. And that's why I'm always amazed at Real America's Voice or the other channels that are similar to Real America's Voice that people claim are right wing or far right. And I beg to differ a little bit. I think these are probably some of the only outlets where you can actually get real information. And you have, I think Democrats for the most part, John, they don't go on Real America's Voice. At least I'm not aware of it. I think sometimes they have reporters that chase them through the halls of Congress, but they just don't participate. So you have this bifurcated system, one of which is small but mighty, meaning kind of the center right and the people that are on Truth Social, the ones that we have on Truth Plus, which is our new streaming app. I urge everyone, you can tie it to your Truth Social account if you want. If you don't have a Truth Social account, you can go and download it. It's on not only Apple, but the Apple App Store, Android, but also on most televisions. And that's a plug, not just for our company, but really we built this for you. The President Trump, we wanted to build this for people so that they could use it and have access to news, because a lot of times the news channels that we have, you won't find them on your typical cable TV. So you can actually cut the cord. You can watch John and Amanda anywhere you want to go at any time. By the way, it's now global. So anywhere you go, you can watch Truth Plus, and you have access to this news that has been outright banned or shadow banned from these legacy media channels. So that's why. So we're bifurcated in this country with what I would say real news and people trying to get to the real news, i.e., what you do, John, at Just the News every day. And then you have this cabal of jackals and people that are being paid under the table, people that are being bought free dinners in order to, promote a story. So, John, they're really co-conspirators in this. Now, when I say that, does it mean that they are going to be busted? I doubt it, but they were the recipient of illegal leaks of classified information. Point one, General Flynn. That was a leak. I originally, came out and said, what the hell is going on here back in early 2017. This is right before all the ICA Russia crap stuff happened. So these are massive leaks. What the hell's going on? Like, why isn't every FBI agent around in Washington, D.C., trying to track down how these leaks of an incoming administration are happening? So they were involved in these illegal leaks of classified information. And in fact, they just continued today. I mean, even recently, just in the Trump administration, you had illegal leaks from the intelligence agencies that were designed to harm President Trump. So therein lies where we sit today. Thankfully, there is a grand jury investigation that has begun. And hopefully, and I know that there was a strike force that was stood up by the Department of Justice, and hopefully justice will be served to these criminals. This has been criminal activity that has been ongoing. If you want to go back all the way to Benghazi, right? I can even take it as far back as that, but for sure against President Trump, it started in late 2015, for sure early 2016. That was what our investigation uncovered, was that it wasn't just the Steele dossier. You may remember,
right,
John and Amanda, through Lee Smith's reporting, he actually found what we nicknamed, I don't know if there's really a name for them, but they were proto dossiers.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, they weren't tying Trump to Putin, but they were tying Trump to dirty oligarchs around the world. Yep. All fake, all nonsense. And once that kind of failed and stumbled, then they turned to weaponizing the FBI and the CIA, as we know, in around March or April of 2016. And it culminates with the raid at Mar-a-Lago. So they were targeting President Trump and have been for a very, very long time.
That's right. Congressman, I loved John's very, very keen comparison to Nixon, because you look back at that time and Nixon's own party got to the point where they said, all right, you weaponize intelligence agencies to bolster your claims and we're out. But Democrats have to believe the evidence before they can even be given the chance to say we're in or we're out. But because the media keeps selling this narrative that it's not substantiated, disbelieving it, how do we get to the point where Democrats can make an honest assessment of it?
Well, first of all, the not to correct John for the second time during the show, but I will, just because I like him so much. But Nixon is not a fair comparison.
Yeah.
What Nixon, I would compare Nixon to, a guy who got caught playing a dirty political trick, like a little boy stealing a cookie or something and not telling his parents and not coming, forth with the truth. What these guys are doing is like the Charles Manson of politics and manipulation of intelligence and conspiracy. People have died. People have lost their livelihoods. Yeah. People have lost their careers. People have not been promoted. Families have been destroyed. Finances have been wiped out. Millions of Americans were kicked off of social media. News networks like Real America's Voice were not allowed onto the legacy media platforms. This damage is far and wide and has been ongoing for a long time. So Nixon is not even a drop in the bucket to what this kind of 2 or 3 dozen criminals in and around the Clinton operation, the DNC, and Obama's operation, and Biden's operation for that matter, have been doing now for over a decade.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said about people dying because no one died because of Russiagate, but actually that same intelligence machinery, which was leaking really sensitive intelligence around the world, it did lead to the loss of sensitive assets in the field for our intelligence agencies. That's not a fake claim. We've lost people in the field because of the leaky, creaky Obama and Biden intelligence leaks, right?
Well, not only that, John, it also is I think bigger than that. And it's a point that I've been making. I think I made it a couple weeks ago when I was on your show. And that is this. The time that was taken away from the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence, not focusing on places like Ukraine and Russia and terrorists around the globe, and whether it be in China for that matter, all of that combined, when you have people not working, not doing their job, or if they are working, they're manipulating intelligence, or you're keep holding back great intelligence officers from doing their job. You have the Congress completely, I was running a China investigation for many, many years that got essentially derailed. We kept running that investigation, largely ignored by the fake news media because they were all fixated on the Russia hoax. But think of the lives that have been lost just in the Russia-Ukraine. And I say this because I don't believe that Putin invades Ukraine had these fools not went around and made this crazy person out of Putin and basically accused Putin of things that he wasn't doing in 16 and 17 and 18 and all that time frame that probably made him even crazier than he is. And I say all that because the fake news that may watch this, they probably won't, but if they do, they'll say, oh, well, he's denying that that Putin is a problem. No, you fools. Go back and look at the record.
You were the first to warn about
I
him.
was only ones that actually was saying and writing and going on places like CNN saying that Putin was having his way. It was the largest intelligence failure since 9/11, 2001.
Right. When
did I say that, John and Amanda, ironically? In the spring of 2016, I said Putin was the largest intelligence failure since 9/11 for our intelligence agencies. And so bad things lead to bad things. And now you have 1 million people or more just in Ukraine and Russia that have died. Not to mention, all the other disasters that it's created for the Department of Defense and everywhere else around the world. And this is what the Trump administration, what the president has charged me with our oversight board to make sure that we are setting policies in place, that we are running investigations that will clean up the DOJ, clean up the FBI, clean up the CIA, and get them focused on doing their job so that we can recruit young men and women that ought to go into this and want to serve their country and do it in a way that's honorable. And the only way that this gets fixed, I believe, is if people are held accountable for the nonsense that's been going on and the criminality. I don't say nonsense, that's too nice of a word. The criminals need to be locked up, plain and simple.
Well, a grand jury is now going to be looking at that. We're going to get some real results one way or the other soon. Congressman, as always, a great honor to have you on. We always learn a lot. Thanks for joining us today. What a great interview.
All right, John. Next time I won't correct you as many times.
It's okay. I liked it. It was fun. All right. Good stuff. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, big steps being taken to eliminate DEI in the government. We'll explain that next after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. The Department of Justice made a huge move yesterday to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in government, ending a race-based hiring decree that was supposed to increase so-called diversity in the workforce. But I'm pretty sure in America you are not supposed to judge people based on the color of their skin. But it seems that the federal government had been doing that, and under the Trump administration, they are finally fixing the situation. So joining us now to talk about that and much more is Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice, Harmeet Dillon. Thanks so much for being here. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
How infectious was DEI in the government before Trump took over, before you took over? People who care about rooting that out and people who care about someone's character instead of the color of their skin. How bad was it?
Well, given successive laws passed by Congress and then bad interpretations of those laws, what we now call DEI has permeated virtually every aspect of our government contracting, government hiring, the civil service test that we're talking about, voting rights issues, and more. And so it has become habitual for certain categories of people in this country to rely on race being used as a proxy for, getting a special leg up. And as many Supreme Court opinions have written, and even in dissents, and Justice Thomas is notorious for this, this concept is inconsistent with equal protection in the Constitution. And so we have the Constitution, which is our super law, and it's at odds with our civil rights laws in many ways. And so this is where you're seeing a lot of very interesting decisions come to the surface at the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So important. And you mentioned voting rights, and I think your division has been so active and so consequential in the first few months. Wisconsin put on notice it may lose its funding if it doesn't start complying with integrity laws. But the big brouhaha in Texas at the State House, where the Democrats have basically absconded and won't do their job, actually is triggered by a letter you sent Texas telling them that some of their districts were illegal. Tell us about that.
Well, yes. So I mentioned that the courts are beginning to percolate these decisions that are striking down portions of the precedents that have, some would say required, but certainly enabled race-based districting. And so one of the flavors of race-based districting that states have tried to do over the years, and tried to do because they've been forced to do by plaintiffs, minority groups, plaintiffs, is that you can combine multiple minority groups or count on a certain white crossover group to a minority group to make what's called a coalition minority district under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And in the Fifth Circuit, which Texas is a part of, there was a recent decision in 2023 that struck down this concept of coalition districts, but left alive what is now going to be considered by the Supreme Court a sort of majority minority district. But you have to have a single minority that composes a majority of that district. I know that's a lot, but this is a very convoluted area of the law. So we took a look at Texas, and we found that 4 of their districts in Texas are comprised of these so-called coalition districts. In other words, to get to a special minority district, you have to add together multiple minorities or count on a certain percentage of a crossover white vote. And this is too complex, too weird, and too inconsistent with equal protection. And so we wrote to Texas telling them that even though that law had been struck down a couple of years ago, their districts are now not in compliance with the federal voting rights laws, and so they needed to take action to fix them. That is what triggered the Texas legislature and the Texas governor to call the legislature into session to put new maps together, and that is what caused all these Democrats to spitefully flee the jurisdiction to avoid there being a quorum. And so I think this is very interesting. You can see that from the extreme reaction of certain people that they are very concerned. And you've seen members of Congress come out, and you've seen Governor Gavin Newsom from my former state of California come out and troll governors of other states over this, that this is an existential threat to the seats that have been gerrymandered for minority congressional candidates who get in there and then keep them for years. And some of these districts stretch 200 miles and they go around multiple counties and they cross bodies of water and they violate concepts in the voting rights laws that have to do with compactness of districts, contiguity of districts, and respect for political subdivisions. For example, the types of lines that are drawn for state legislative districts. These congressional monster districts that look like snakes, and they're really quite ridiculous. And so the Supreme Court is actually going to be taking up this issue in one step further than the analysis I did for that letter. And so really a lot is at stake here in this voting rights area.
It's huge.
I was at the White House about an hour ago, and President Trump was asked about this very issue. And the question was posed to him, is it worth it for Republicans to win out on this argument in Texas and Republicans get 5 more electoral votes and seats in Congress? Or, you have these other states, like you said, California, Massachusetts, Illinois, champing at the bit to gerrymander even more. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't know how it's going to shake out, and that's actually not my job in the Civil Rights Division. My job in the Civil Rights Division is nonpartisan. It is to understand and enforce the federal voting rights laws. And so Justice Thomas's dissent from the recent punting of a particular case that is now the center of attention here, Louisiana versus Calais, really very sharply calls into focus the fact that the court's interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which enables and some would say requires racial gerrymandering all over the United States, and not just in Texas, in every state, just about, except for those states that only have one district, is directly at odds with the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. So it's interesting that in trying to remedy the vestiges, the recent vestiges of slavery in our country, which brought us the Equal Protection Clause, we've had these later laws that are relying on extremely outdated concepts of now completely banned for decades tests like like, poll taxes and literacy tests to become registered to vote. These don't exist anymore in America, and yet we're still drawing districts to remedy discrimination that hasn't existed for decades. And so California may blithely be trolling other states over their lines, but the fact is that California is rife with majority minority districts that have been drawn. They're pet little districts for some of the longest running members of Congress. And all of these things are threatened. By the way, whenever you get rid of these types of districts, you're also, of course, affecting the districts around them. And
Yep.
I was talking to a friend about this when Louisiana first passed this type of a district. They were accused of an unholy alliance between Republicans who wanted, safe districts for themselves, and the sort of civil rights lawyers who wanted safe minority districts. Some would say both have safe districts in that situation, but it's 2025 in America today, and people can get elected on their merit. Nobody is banning people or hindering people because of their race from reaching the polls or from competing for office. And so I think that's really the current concept is, and I think the Supreme Court's going to decide that this term, hopefully, whether Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act any longer permits or certainly requires racial gerrymandering. And so Texas is just one example. I can tell you several states have similar problems with their districts. And so we're going to see a lot of this shake out over the coming months.
Will they be getting letters too?
No comment.
I think we know what to watch for. Yeah. Real quickly before we let you go, I want to turn to something else because we now know there's an investigation of what happened during the 2016 Russiagate, maybe continuing all the way into 2024. And a lot of time I think people look at civil liberties and say, oh, that's a civil issue. It only happens on the civil side of the court system. But I know you can't comment about the ongoing investigation, but in general, there are instances where depriving someone of their civil liberties is a criminal act, right? It's not just a civil enforcement matter.
Well, exactly. And this again goes back to those Reconstruction era statutes that sought to remedy the vestiges of racism. And we had some terrible incidents in our country's history of law enforcement officials conspiring to deprive African Americans of their civil rights. And that is where some of these laws stem from, but they're broader than that. And so it can be a crime for government officials, either together or in conspiring with non-government officials, to violate people's civil rights. That's also a civil violation. I've actually sued over that in California for pro-life activists. And, right. We have longstanding cases involving these issues. And so I think, government officials may think because nobody ever bothers to enforce these statutes that they're immune and they can do whatever they want. Not so. And so I think that's why you're seeing some people tongue-in-cheek saying that in D.C. every lawyer is being retained or retaining a lawyer themselves these days as these investigations have begun to hit the news wires.
Pretty amazing stuff ahead of us.
Harmeet, I want to ask you about a little-known case. It's not getting a ton of media attention, but I'm sure that you've been following it. Chuck Gray, who serves as Wyoming's Secretary of State, just won a big case against very well-established and some would say infamous Mark Elias, the Democrat lawyer. And they now have what I think is the strongest U.S. citizenship requirement to vote in that state. Is this somewhat of a prototype for other states and other states' secretaries of state to use in their own?
So I was recused from that case here at the Department of Justice because in my prior life, before I joined the government, my law firm was actively involved in that case. But so now that it's over, I think I can say, I don't think anyone would be surprised to know that as a longtime election lawyer, I fully stand in favor of election integrity. And there are multiple reasons for that. First of all, we don't want people cheating. But second, we want all citizens of all political stripes and backgrounds to have confidence in the outcome of elections, because we really need that for people to pull together and work with the government, whether they voted for it or not, and feel like they're properly represented. And we don't have that today in America. I think there's been so much laxity that is occasioned by COVID loosening of rules that became permanent in many states. And then just frankly, laziness on the part of many states and refusal to comply with our federal civil rights laws that require list maintenance and certain procedures to be in place to help citizens feel confident that errors are rectified, that it's chaos. And so we are at the Civil Rights Division with our staff are, going through one by one, writing letters to these jurisdictions, asking them to clean up their voter rolls and make sure they're complying with federal law. But this law is something that states can do. They don't have to do it, but states are beginning to do this one by one. A lot of states are doing this, and Democrats like Mark Elias, activists, have tried to prevent that, saying that somehow requiring voter ID in 2025 is some kind of racist concept.
Yeah.
This is ludicrous. This is wrong, and I think you are going to see a wave of state leaders who are and legislatures who favor election integrity and confidence of the voters in the outcome of these elections, requiring voter ID. And it's a good development for democracy.
It is indeed. It's going to be very good to see. Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. Thanks so much for being here tonight. All right, everybody, we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back on the other side of these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. For those who follow my career, one of the big stories I spent a lot of time at the Associated Press was covering the Oklahoma City bombing and some of the unanswered questions. In fact, some of my stories prompted the FBI to reopen the case around the time that Timothy McVeigh was executed, not because he didn't commit it, but because maybe other co-conspirators weren't pursued aggressively enough. We're lucky to be joined by right now the former news director for America's Most Wanted, one of my favorite shows going up. She's an award-winning journalist and author of the new book, Blowback, which takes a closer look at the FBI's role in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. She is a good friend, Margaret Roberts. Margaret, good to have you on the show.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
This is a fantastic book.
Hi, Amanda.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
This is a fantastic book. I think I know a lot about Oklahoma City. I learned a ton about things I didn't know. This is an incredible contribution to the record of what happened here and on the 30th anniversary of one of the deadliest terror attacks. Tell us what inspired you to do it.
It was partly America's Most Wanted, John. I had that dual perspective. Like millions of Americans, I witnessed in horror what happened on April 19, 1995, the devastation, the injuries, the deaths. And at the same time, having that America's Most Wanted experience, I was also focused on the manhunt that immediately unspooled and became the biggest manhunt in the world for the unknown and never identified accomplice of Timothy McVeigh's, who rode next to him in the bomb truck and was seen by 24 eyewitnesses that morning as they headed for the Murrah building and detonated that deadly bomb.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So important.
John and I, especially on this show, but at Just the News, we truly, truly value whistleblowers and their contribution to transparency and fighting corruption. And I know whistleblowers played a big part, an integral part of your book. Tell us about that.
They sure did, Amanda. The first whistleblower of sorts was actually a member of the federal grand jury. A horse breeder named Hoppy Heidelberg, who was so disturbed by what was going on behind closed doors that he went rogue and eventually wrote a letter to the judge accusing the federal prosecutors of rigging that grand jury by hiding the identity of John Doe 2. The next whistleblower of note came a couple of years later when an Oklahoma journalist found a federal informant. Her name was Carol Howe. She had actually, few people know this, she had actually been embedded in the bomb plot in a rural Oklahoma enclave called Elohim City, and was warning her ATF handlers for months in advance of the bombing that a bombing was coming and that Oklahoma City was on the short list. Another whistleblower really comes out at the end of my investigation, which, believe it or not, spans over 20 years. And this is John Matthews, a top FBI operative in the 1990s who came forward to the primary source for my book, who is Jesse Trinidad, a lawyer in Salt Lake City, and a Marine. And John Matthews, also a Marine, came forward to tell Jesse about PatCon and his years as a top FBI spy against right-wing extremists. But his experience was that this program was basically inciting the violence that he had signed on to stop. And so he left disillusioned 8 years later.
I remember talking to all of those extraordinary figures as I was winding through my journey. You've done such a great job of pulling it together. And people say, well, 30 years later, why does it make a difference? But I think there's a really important character in this book that a lot of people forget about. He later would become the Attorney General, but Merrick Garland was the key supervisor of how this investigation unfolded, how it was controlled. 30 years later, he's still facing some pretty serious questions about his conduct. Talk a little bit about what you learned about him.
Absolutely. Well, he was the hands-on manager of the lone wolf prosecution, and shaped that investigation from the beginning to focus only on Timothy McVeigh and his role as the mastermind and perpetrator, nearly single-handed, of the crime, when in fact, as our investigation reveals, and John Solomon was central to this in the early 2000s, this neo-Nazi bank robbery gang known as the Aryan Republican Army come into view as suspect candidates, and they were completely ignored. So it is quite noteworthy that after all those years, when Merrick Garland became the Attorney General, he was, he announced that white supremacy was the gravest menace facing America. But when you look back at PatCon, which the whistleblower John Matthews revealed to our investigation, PatCon inciting the violence that it was supposed to be stopping really raises the question about manufactured terror and whether how Merrick Garland could have traveled all that time up the ladder of the Justice Department and not have known about PatCon and its actions.
Yeah. Before we let you go, Margaret, I want to make one more connection because I hope I don't look real silly here. I think the years were 92, 93, and 95. You have these cluster of events that draw in the FBI and bring in questions about the FBI. This, Waco, and Ruby Ridge. Do we still have the same problems in our intelligence community as we did back then, and with all the scandal that happened around those as well?
Well, it certainly appears that we do. And that is one of the threads that we follow in my investigation. You see, we encountered suspected undercover informants in numbers in this case. Yep. And it came to look a lot more like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plot than the government's case of lone wolf terror as it was prosecuted against McVeigh, and as history books still tell us today. Yet, credibly, people have looked at tragedies that ensued afterwards, including the Boston Marathon bombing, and some other more recent events. And just today, the talk of the town is Jeffrey Epstein. Was he an FBI informant? It's clear that this is a major problem, and yes, it's still with us today.
Yeah, that's why your book, Blowback, is a must-read. Folks, go get this book. It is a fantastic read. I learned a ton, and I did a lot of reporting on this. Margaret Roberts, you have done a great contribution to this country. Thanks for writing the book, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you both.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to change things up. We're going to do a little 3-minute wrap on the first 3 interviews, and we're going to finish up with my good friends at
Natalie Dominguez.
Well, Natalie Dominguez, I'm
Home
sorry, I
Title
lost
Lock.
the script there for a second. Natalie will be up. We'll have a great conversation about Home Title Lock. But first, a little wrap. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. All right, we've had some great conversations. I want to, before we lose our train of thought, a couple things we picked up. I wanted to just remind people, in Oklahoma City, the FBI's investigation was so bad under Merrick Garland that this little reporter here found the missing explosives that the FBI missed. There was all these blasting caps. They didn't know where they were. They were sitting right in one of the suspects' home. I led them right to it just from my reporting, and they found it, had to raid the home, scare the new owners of it. But there were blasting caps sitting under their stairwell. No, they never found it.
Unbelievable.
And my reporting stopped the execution of Tim McGee for a while, not because he was innocent. He was a bad dude, but because they had not given him Brady material, things that were required. That was Merrick Garland and the FBI. Not a whole lot's changed 20, 30 years later. Isn't that crazy?
Fumbling all over.
I love the questioning we did with Harmeet Dillon, and I think I just heard a big headline in that interview. People are getting lawyers because it's possible this Justice Department is going to treat the government's actions as a criminal violation of civil liberties. I don't think a lot of people were thinking that a month or two ago, thinking perjury and other things. Criminal violation of civil liberties. You know what that means? Democrats' favorite law, the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Used against them.
Used against them,
Yeah,
potentially against their
absolutely
actors. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make another connection related to what we spoke to Devin Nunes about,
Please.
because this letter signed by the 51 Intel officials that Mike Morrell both co-authored and organized. Do you remember, I know you do, does our audience remember, who called Mike Morrell to thank him for that letter?
Tony Blinken.
Steve Ricchetti.
Oh, Steve Ricchetti,
who
that's
went
right.
on
Tony
to
Blinken spurred the idea.
Yeah,
Steve Ricchetti.
who went on to be
campaign
Joe
chairman.
Biden's campaign chairman.
That's right.
Golly, all of these sticky, gross relationships.
Yeah, no,
Too many connections.
It's Washington at its worst, and now the question is: does this wash, rinse, repeat cycle that we've seen protect the Democrat, injure the Republican, maybe violate their civil rights, as Harmeet hinted at? Does that rise to criminality? I guess we're going to find out in the next 6 months.
It's the same thing with both these letters: wash, rinse, repeat. They get somebody to put the letter out there, and in the case of 2016, Hillary Clinton used it to bolster the argument, to bolster the Russia collusion narrative, and then in 2020, the same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop, all over again.
In Watergate, Nixon loses them because the CIA is asked to interfere with the FBI. In Russiagate, the opposite occurs. The FBI is forcing the CIA to change its intelligence community assessment and make a fake assessment. Same abuse, just in a different direction.
Incredible.
Those are the sort of things that we can educate the public on, because that sizzle reel reminds us all that the legacy media is not telling the truth to the American. They are withholding really important stuff. You know it because you're lucky enough to watch this network, and we appreciate that. All right, quick commercial break. When we come back, Home Title Lock. It is a real theft, this home title theft trend. It's really happening. Natalie Dominguez is one of the best at describing why you want to protect yourself and how you do it. We're going to have that next, right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. There is a dangerous rising crime in America the FBI has dubbed house stealing, and it can happen to any homeowner. In fact, that's exactly what happened to the Kelly family from Houston, Texas, who decided to put a home that was in their family since the 1960s up for sale. And what happened next is the stuff of nightmares. Here is their family lawyer explaining it.
They were approached by local fraudster and real estate mogul Jerry Gurley. They received a poor offer from him, and they declined. Unfazed, Jerry Gurley, with the help of his notary, forged all 6 signatures of the family members onto the deed, filed into the property records, and with the help of the corrupt and now
now to talk about how you can protect yourself from this very same thing happening to you. Title theft education expert from Home Title Lock, Natalie Dominguez. Natalie, welcome back.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, John. It's lovely to be back with you guys. Always wish it was under better circumstances, but I'm so glad that we're able to be here and talk about these very real stories that are happening to people.
Absolutely, because
all over America.
Yeah, I mean, this Jerry Gurley story is scary, but there are a lot of Jerry Gurleys out there.
Absolutely. The one thing that I like that the the attorney talked about was, him coming in and giving a lowball offer. This is something that we are seeing more and more. And, we have to deal with all these scams on a daily basis, regardless, right? I get probably 15 calls a day from numbers that I don't know and don't recognize. But now we're getting these scams where people in the industry that are actually doing this professionally are approaching homeowners. And my personal opinion, we don't know this for sure, this is all alleged, but I don't even think that Jerry Gurley ever attempted to even purchase their home. The attorney says he gave them a lowball offer. I think that this was his way of getting in on talking to the family, seeing what their family dynamic is like, figuring out what happened after the dad's death. He approached them 2 years after the father had died and they inherited the home. And most people aren't thinking, oh, this person's out to scam me, when there's someone in the industry that does this for a living, right? It's terrifying. Now we have to worry about people that are, actually real estate moguls and lawyers and attorneys and community organizers, like that community organizer in Detroit. Who do we trust anymore?
Yeah, it's really a big deal. The insider threat is real on this, and these criminals are picking off their friends now and trying to get them in. What happens in that case? Is there a criminal prosecution or a civil? What happens to make sure that some accountability finally happened there?
So we can actually use this story as a really good example. Unfortunately, there is no title theft crime on the books, right? If someone gets arrested for this, generally they're charged with something like wire transfer or identity theft or something like that. Luckily, in some states like New York, last year they finally passed the law that made it a grand larceny charge, but this is not the case in every state. So unfortunately, with this example, and I think it didn't get played in the actual clip, but what happened with this family was Jerry Gurley transferred it into his name. He sold the property behind their back, and this company that thought that they had purchased this property for gentrification purposes legally went and actually bulldozed this family home. So I don't think we covered that in the beginning. Their home is gone. 60 years of memories, a family legacy, it's gone. So they went after this guy civilly because it was a paperwork issue, right? They were able to get a civil settlement of about $200,000. But as of when this report came out, he has paid the family nothing. The amount he owes is up to $280,000 with interest. And so basically what happens is this family's house and memories and, financial future is gone. They're owed $200,000, and this guy is getting off with a slap on the wrist. And allegedly, he's been charged with multiple counts of a similar thing over the past decade. So this isn't even the first time it's happened, but no criminal charges have been placed.
Yeah, and $200,000. I'm quite sure that the home is actually worth more than that. But if this
100%.
family had home title lock, where in the process would this have gotten stopped?
Oh, as soon as something is filed with the county and they've, done their thing, they've taken the paperwork, they've indexed it. What happens is if you are a home title lock subscriber, right? The beauty of our $1 million triple lock protection is monitoring, alerts, and then restoration. So the monitoring part is really important because a lot of people tend to think, oh, well, I have, identity theft protection or credit monitoring or whatever. So if something were to happen to me, it's going to hit that. But we monitor the property, not the person. So if someone like Jerry Gurley comes along and tries to sell your house or take out a loan against it, that's not going to be hitting your credit because the house is no longer in your name. So we monitor the property. If we were monitoring this home, the moment that paperwork was filed and processed, you guys would be getting a notification of that. So we would have been able to jump in and fix everything with our restoration team and put a stop to it before the house ever got a chance to sell. It would have been put to a stop.
Wow, pretty powerful. All right, we know from the FBI agents that we brought on this show over the years and Matt and others who were involved in the creating of this crime, this is growing by the day. AI is going to make it worse, isn't it?
Absolutely. AI, we talk about this all the time post-COVID. Jim Dennehy, who is a now retired former FBI, said last year that in the 4 years since COVID, vacant property fraud alone raised 500%. Everything can be done online now after COVID. You can sell your house without ever meeting a buyer, a notary, anyone in person. You can do all of that online.
Yeah. Gosh. So this is a crime that is already so much bigger than people realize, and with the advent of AI, it's going to explode Even worse. Thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. And to all of you, our wonderful viewers, if you want to protect yourself from the crime of house stealing, go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. You're going to get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. So that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back here at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.